Good morning and welcome to the Harry Jackson Show. I'm your host, Harry Jackson, and this is a wonderful day. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it, is the thing I'd like to say. This is a talk show. We are dealing with the issues of our day from a Christian worldview perspective. Today, we normally deal with matters of faith and family and practice, but the big news of our day has got to begin with the new Pope. And I think this is a great landmark decision. We hope to have Sammy Rodriguez with us on in the future. This is a new Pope who is of Hispanic origin, if you will, although he really has Italian family lineage. He is from Argentina, which means he's from the Americas. And we can talk in a moment about all the papal first, but I'd like to digress for one moment and talk about what the name Pope means. Pope can be considered a name that we would substitute for father or papa. Literally, in Latin, it can mean bridge builder. And so it has a concept of one of the fatherly functions of building, construction of a family. And I believe that the fatherly function of affirmation and approval and giving direction and leadership is what this man is supposed to do for the church, given the fact that all Christians have as our rootstock the Roman Catholic Church, and the fact that there's over 1 billion adherents to Roman Catholicism in the world, then we really have to understand that this is significant for all people of the way, if you want to call it that, all folks who are associated with Christianity around the world. A few years ago, my personal hero, if you will, Chuck Colson, created something called the Manhattan Declaration, in which he asked for all the people who are of evangelical as well as Roman Catholic and any kind of Protestant background who call themselves Christian, people of the way, as he would want to call them, would all agree that there are three things we should begin to fight for within the context of our culture. And those three things would be for religious liberty, for life as we understand it, the life of the unborn, all the way through the dignity and protection of human life across the spectrum of the lifetime of man. And then also for the institution of marriage, upon which so many things are built. And I think that Chuck Colson had it right, that we've got to recognize the unity of all of our denominations and groups that are moving to follow Jesus Christ. Now, I want to talk for a moment about the fact that if you break down the Roman Catholic world, that you'll find that 39% of the Roman Catholics live in Latin America, 24% live in Europe, 17% live in Africa or the Middle East, 12% in Asia-Pacific areas, and only 8% in North America. And I think in terms of unifying the Roman Catholic Church, the bringing forth of this wonderful, very humble man to be the Pope was probably a very wise thing. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, this election makes him the first Jesuit Pope, the first Pope of the Americas. You've heard this on many other broadcasts. The first Pope from the Southern Hemisphere. That was a new one for me. And the first Pope from outside Europe in more than 1,200 years, and the first Pope to take on the name Francis. And so The name reflects his ministry for the poor. And I believe that this is one of the areas where the Roman Catholic Church has done stellar work historically, and that it has been a forerunner and a model in terms of the ministry to and on behalf of poor people. In the Washington, D.C. area, for example, there's an amazing level of city services and help to poor and impoverished people that is being done in the city because of the involvement of the Roman Catholic Church. And I think that this is part of their great legacy. But at the same time, because we've got all these problems with how wrongly the issue of pedophilia and the internal abuse cases had been handled historically by the church, it means that we really have to bring balance at this time if the Roman Catholic Church and in some ways the Christian message is going to remain as viable and vital as it should be. We're going to have to balance out our reputation and our practices. Jim Daly, of Focus on the Family, would call this, we should have our orthodoxy, the teaching of the church traditionally, and our orthopraxy, the works that we do day to day, match up, line up. And I think there's some confusion. Right in the same newspaper, New York Times, there's an article that says the Los Angeles Archdiocese is to pay $10 million in abuse. And it begins to talk about a former leader, Cardinal Roger Mahoney, and it goes through this long detail about a former priest, Michael Baker, has been accused of molesting at least 23 boys over a 30-year period and was convicted of abusing 2 boys in 2007. And the cases were settled and had been set for trial early next month. And it goes on and on about these things, though not on the front page part of the story. And that's why this Pope at this time, I think, is important. There has to be a unification around the doctrine and the future practices of the church. One way to look at it is, you've been hearing this, there could have been the insiders, the administrators of the church, could have called one of their own to come along, the insiders who may have been participants in what we would call the cover-ups. And then there could have been radical social reformers who wanted just to fix things, and their fixes were simply to accommodate the felt needs of folk out there in the culture, but who would not have been very, very anchored in the traditional doctrines of the church. To bring a Jesuit who would be anchored in the teachings and the doctrines historically of the Roman Catholic Church, but not tied into administration, not tainted, if you will, by an agenda of cover-up, and not committed to radical reform that's not attached to historic doctrine, means that you got the right guy to say, let's go back to the basics. Let's redefine who we are. Let's get radical. The word radical really means let's return to the roots. Let's get radical. Let's return to our roots. Let's examine our doctrines, and then let's make sure that going forward, our practice matches up with what we teach. And in other words, let's walk the walk, walk the talk, and let us do what we said we'd do. So I think it's a great choice, the Pope, as for his story. A couple of things that are also out there that are concerning to me. This is Harry Jackson, by the way. You're listening to the Harry Jackson Show, and we're on the Urban Family Network, and we want you to tweet us at Bishop Harry, the Harry Jackson Show. Bishop Harry, hashtag the Harry Jackson Show. We'll respond to you. We're also on Facebook.com/HILC2, or you can email us at thetruthinblackandwhite.com. CPAC is here in the Washington area, and I want to say yay, except that we have one problem. You say, what's the problem? Well, there cannot be a resurgence of the conservative movement in America unless there's a redefinition of who we are, what our goals are, and where we're going. Conspicuously missing among the key speakers in the main events are a lot of minority voices that are the people that need to be attracted in this next season of the conservative movement's life. In other words, like the Roman Catholic Church we just mentioned, we've got to go back to our foundational doctrines and teachings, but we also have to be inclusive to people who are going to be major components of our future. So the Roman Catholics said, get a historically sound doctrinal guy, but let's go with someone who has Hispanic roots, who represents the wave of the future of where we're going demographically. I did not see that kind of commitment within the conservative movement. Shame on us. If we're going to be valuable in this next time, we are going to have to not only get back to our roots, but we're going to have to get to connect with the most important group of people. There's something called the browning of America that's getting ready to happen, whether we like it or not. And I think we're going to have to touch some of these people. Also, I'm upset. What are you upset about? Well, I'm upset about the fact that Chris Christie of New Jersey, and, you know, we got to reach out to slightly rotund individuals. I used to be one of them myself. That's code for, when I was growing up, there used to be a song that say, short people ain't got nobody. I'm here to tell you, fat people ain't got nobody, folks. And I are one of them. So I want you to know that they need some of us fat guys, big guys, formerly muscular, massive football players that have turned into people with furniture disease. You know what that means. That's when your chest slips into your drawers. That's a furniture disease. And we I'm having fun this Thursday. I hope you're tracking with me. It's all right. We're having a problem with, you know, the first question they asked people is, well, we can't vote for him. Why not? Well, he doesn't look presidential. What's that mean? Does it mean he's not honest? Well, no. You mean he looks like a GQ model or not? Oh, well, have we gone back to high school politics, or are we talking about leading the most powerful nation on the face of the earth? Do we want the right person in a position, or are we just trying to get somebody that looks good? On one of my papers here in USA Today, there's a great picture of Mitt Romney, who my youngest daughter, who she wouldn't like me to say this, but she did vote for him, shows him waving. He looks wonderful. She affectionately calls him Mittens. And so Mittens is waving at everybody. But as wonderful as he looks, guess what? He didn't connect with anybody in this new Browning of America group. Folks, if we don't get this right now, it's going to be a long, cold winter, and we're going to watch a progressive spiraling out of control of the folks in the White House and the Capitol, and the confusion that we're seeing in downtown D.C. is that we let all the fast-talking people get elected because I think we keep trying to bring the smartest guy in the room into the chair, and we are so doctrinaire and so exclusive that we don't pick the right kind of leaders. So shame on somebody that Chris Christie is not in the room. And there's a whole group of radical anti-family, pro-gay agenda, GOP conservatives, quote, quote. I don't know how you are conservative, you're against traditional values and family, that are trying to inch their way into our side of the aisle, bring division among us, and start a mess. So I believe we're going to have a great opportunity to make change if we keep our goals in mind. Let's get radical, go back to our roots, and let's get revolutionary in terms of let's reach out to the next generation. This is Harry Jackson, The Harry Jackson Show. Right after the break, we're going to come back and we're going to be talking to Dr. Carl Benzio, and he's the founder and executive director of the Lighthouse Network. Stay tuned.
Passing the plate may be taking on a new form. Electronic giving for your church or ministry, all the while supporting AFA.
One of the things that we've focused on over the last few years is being able to facilitate donations.
That's Nick Logan, founder and CEO of Cornerstone Payment Systems.
I'm confident that Christ calls us to be wise as Christians, and as you look at finding a credit card provider, if you look at Cornerstone, we will be honored to serve your ministry. And for as long as you're a business or ministry processing with Cornerstone, we will donate 50% of the revenue that we receive on those transactions back to American Family.
CornerstonePaymentSystems.com or 877-356-1208. 877-356-1208. Cornerstone Payment Systems is a registered ISO of Harris Bank, Buffalo Grove, Illinois, member FDIC.
Many of us have carried the weight of our secrets for way too long. Guilt and unforgiveness settle into our hearts and minds, and the burden becomes unbearable. Hi, I'm Sherry Rigby of October Baby. Like you, I carried this burden for years with the guilt of having had an abortion. I know that pain all too well. You think you're beyond forgiveness, beyond healing, but there is hope. There is forgiveness, and it is for you right now. There is a movement across this nation to heal the brokenhearted from carrying the secret of abortion. Since sharing my secret during the filming of October Baby, I have been blessed to partner with Surrendering the Secret and helping many men and women discover freedom from the guilt and shame of abortion. Surrendering the Secret is an 8-part Bible study that will help you find the tools you need to lay your burden down and help you find the forgiveness and freedom you desperately yearn for. Today is the day. Go to surrenderingthesecret.com and click on Get Help Now. Surrenderingthesecret.com.
Pro-abortion group takes action in face of a declining base.
This is a special commentary from the Susan B. Anthony list, named for the suffragette who was proudly pro-life.
According to recent news reports, NARAL Pro-Choice America has tapped longtime Democratic operative Elise Hogue to serve as its new president. This comes as the group seeks to appeal to a younger generation of abortion advocates. Former President Nancy Keenan said the group has found an intensity gap in the younger generation of supporters. Even those who consider themselves firmly pro-choice are not as adamant as their elders. As we have reported before, younger Americans are more likely to affirm the sanctity of human life today than ever before.
This is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony list. To join us in our battle for life, visit our website at sba-list.org.
Welcome back to the Harry Jackson Show. I'm your host, Harry Jackson. I'm joined in the studio by my long-term friend and colleague, David Perlett. We also have Dr. Benzio of the Lighthouse Network joining us. And let me share with you just briefly about what the Lighthouse Network is. This gentleman is a founder and executive director of this group. And he has a bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering, went on to medical school and became a psychiatrist. His experience include being teaching pastors, ministry leaders, and student counselors, and dealing with conflict resolution skills in Uganda and Kenya. Amazing background, by the way. Leading a behavioral health team in post-Hussein Iraq to equip healthcare specialists in treatment and assessment skills, and successfully testifying for Pennsylvania House of Representatives opposing legislation for Plan B contraception administration, and for President George Bush's Council on Bioethics regarding the rights of conscience. And so they deal with addiction and mental health referral issues And the program provides a 24-hour free counseling helpline. So that's a great, great organization. Dr. Benzio, are you there?
Hey, Bishop Harry. Good to be with you.
Great, great. And you can call me just Harry if you'd like to today. But thank you for acknowledging the fact that I'm all revved up and ready to go.
I heard you talking about a revolution. That's what we're all about here.
Well, it sounds like it. We do have to make some radical changes based on eternal truth. And it sounds like you have both a biblical base and a psychological grounding, that you know how people work emotionally and mentally. I need to ask you a point-blank question about gun control, and then I want to ask you a question just about defining further what your organization does before we get into taking the gloves off on these other issues, meaning really pointing out how potentially emotionally ill our culture is. But seemed to me that nothing has been said about the issue of tangible issues of emotional illness with regard to guns. It's like, okay, we'll register everybody. Okay, we know these people were emotionally disturbed. Okay, we know everybody that registers for guns are not going to go out and shoot folks, but we are not going to say anything else about emotional illness at this juncture or how movies affect this issue. But we're going to pat ourselves on the back and feel like we've done something major in terms of dealing with the epidemic of shootings in our culture. Am I seeing this correctly, or am I in some kind of alternative universe?
Well, no, I mean, it's a very complex issue, gun control. I'm certainly in favor of people being able to possess guns, but there needs to be an appropriate process to allow that to happen. And, certainly the straw man purchases need to be regulated against, and there needs to be safeguards to screen, well, who is able to have a gun? A gun is it requires a significant amount of responsibility and skills. So just like whenever we give people tests to drive a car, we have them go through a battery of screeners. And I think we need to do the same thing when we sell somebody a gun. They need to go through some certain screeners to show a certain maturity level, a certain skill set, a certain ability to manage their emotions and their feelings before they are able to have a gun. And whether that's checking criminal records, whether that's having access to mental health records, there's a lot of complexities to that. We certainly want people with mental health issues to come to treatment, but if we're going to divulge that treatment record to other agencies, does that stop people from coming to treatment and therefore allowing that person to get a gun without anybody knowing any background and having more damage being done? So it's a complex thing. I'm not quite sure there's such an easy answer to it, but I think all those elements need to be taken into consideration as we formulate a policy that's fair to everybody.
Well, I have a relative, a young woman who's a veteran of wars, and as pretty and feminine as she looks, some ain't right upstairs, and she's gone to get on and hired on with some police groups, and as they do their various psychological and emotional tests, they come to the conclusion, if you give her a weapon and a badge, there are going to be some wounded people out here, not just emotionally either.
Right,
There's going to be carnage. And it was easy for this because there's been repetitive turndowns of this individual. So I guess what I'm grappling with is, and I don't expect that you're going to have all the answers today, simply there has to be some approach or look at this area lest we blithely go forward. And in my thinking, we're going to have traumatized people get a hold of guns. And again, I'm not sure that it is a pre-screening alone issue. It may be a reporting issue as people are seeing folks, as they are treating folks. I'm not sure, but it seems like, to another question I'm going to ask you, that there are a lot of people who are emotionally unstable. Is that correct? How many millions of Americans are experiencing health problems each year in America?
Well, Harry, let me just backtrack for a second. I agree with you. Probably the biggest issue that we have is the most important skills we need in life are psychological, spiritual growth and development. But those are the two areas that we screen, that we continually assess, and we help equip people to be successful in. But like you say, it comes into play in everything we do. We don't have a good process to, whether they're 2 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, or 25 or 50 years old, we don't have a very good process in place to monitor that, to really help people be fulfilled in life and attain the joy and the peace that God has for us in this life. Going to the statistics, there's about 1/3 of our population here in the United States will have a significant mental health issue this year alone. 61% in their lifetime will. About 30% will have an alcohol abuse or addiction disorder in their lifetime. And 70% of your listeners will have either a sibling, a parent, a child, or a spouse with a significant addiction disorder in their lifetime. I mean, the statistics are staggering.
Well, I've got to say this over the air, and I've been ministering a little bit to our teens all this month. I've been working at our hub church. I lead a network of churches, about 1,200 churches. In the hub church, I do teaching still and the main church. But I had a major, severe addiction issue myself. I'd call addiction in that I used to do in the early 70s, marijuana, those kinds of drugs. And because we could still function, we would not have called it addiction, because, you're able to function, you go to class, you're only doing this thing 3-4 times a week, maybe 5 times a week, maybe almost every day. But, you can still get up and handle your, responsibilities. And I was in this meeting. I was about to say prayer meeting. This is the current life. It was not a prayer meeting unless we were praying on people. I was in this actually hashish time. We were smoking this pipe, and I was a junior in college, and somebody jumps up in the meeting. I'm 5'4". I'm 6'2". At that point, I weighed 230 pounds. 8% body fat at that point, and the guy pulls a bayonet on me.
Wow.
And I'm talking about a military bayonet. Says, "What are you going to do now, big guy?" And, his voice changes. It looks like something out of The Exorcist. And as he starts to come toward me, I'm thinking, I'm going to have to hurt this brother really bad. And sure enough, a few days later, this guy gets put into, an emotional care facility. And he had some very serious emotional problems. Friends of mine during that season of time, one guy jumped off a second-story facility. So that experience was one of the things that led me back to Christ. I went off of all kind of drugs before I rededicated my life to Christ. And I was telling the teenagers this past week and they were sitting in their chairs, and they were staring at me like, "No, the bishop, you did drugs." I said, "Yeah, I'm human. I'm living." But to your point, there are a lot of us who are fighting these addictive behaviors, and those things are a sign that something is wrong. Is that correct, emotionally with us?
Exactly. We all deal with stress. There's trials and tribulations that we're promised in this world, and we all need to develop stress management skills or coping skills. And unfortunately, addictions are, we look to substances a lot, whether it's food, whether it's cigarettes, or whether it's alcohol or the illegal drugs. They allow for an escape, an antithesis, a soothing of that stress and pressure that makes it, easier for people to deal with the difficulties of life. They think it's protective of them, that it's helping them deal with things, but in in actuality, both acutely and in the long run, incredibly destructive. I mean, it's a great lie that Satan perpetrates. And on our LighthouseNetwork.org website, we got a lot of free resources that show even how these drugs affect brain chemistry. So like you said, an hour or two later, when you feel like you're back to normal, you think, oh, well, there's no harm, no foul. But in reality, what it does microscopically to our brain and then over time macroscopically to our brain, what it does to our psychological skills and abilities to handle life, and then especially what it does to us spiritually as far as separating us farther and farther from God, are just so detrimental and damaging to us. But it's amazing how the lies, both our me-centered flesh desires and the lies of Satan, just get in there and make us think, wow, this is something that's useful and beneficial to us, these addictive elements. It's very powerful and debilitating.
Let me ask you this. It seemed like to me, as I told you that story, and I'm learning to be more self-disclosing in these areas because, I'm dealing with the fact that this was nearly 30 years ago. I have been transformed by the gospel as a part of the distant past. It is not a part of my present at all. And, I really overcame. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't use drugs of any sort. I don't cope with those mechanisms. But it seemed to me that my urban environment gave more latitude and permission for those kinds of behaviors to be used as coping mechanisms. Do you find that that's true, that in urban areas and cities that drug access and those kinds of problems are worse in urban areas or not?
Yeah, on our LighthouseNetwork.org helpline, we take calls from all over, and what we find is addictions, really hit everybody. There is nobody that is protected or secluded or has a bubble around them that addictions doesn't hit. On our helpline, we take calls more from the suburbs just because they have more treatment opportunities and access to get to our call line. But there was a study done in 2007, it's probably the most recent study, that shows that the urban area and the significantly rural areas are the two areas that are most hit by alcohol and drug abuse. And a couple of the parameters of that, again, we talked about addictions being a stress or coping mechanism. Well, those are two areas, again, we're looking at more stereotypes and bigger picture, but those are areas that have a lot of stress. In the significantly rural and downtrodden areas, and in the inner city, poverty, homelessness, single-parent families, really contribute to the significant level of stress. And then there's, especially in the urban areas, access to drugs almost anywhere and everywhere in a city environment. Since you have so many people in such close quarters, kids unfortunately get to see drug deals happening and people using drugs with significant frequency, and so they get indoctrinated with, well, this is just sort of one of the rites of passage of life as you make decisions and you deal with the stressors of life. This is one of the ways that they're sort of role modeled for them to deal with it, and it's much more visible in the inner city, so it just continues to perpetuate the addiction process that has really impacted our urban areas in profound ways.
Well, we've even had pastors recently in the news, nationally known, in some black communities. I'm sure it's true in all kinds of communities. Black communities, we've had illicit drugs. Recently, one town in Florida, a younger white pastor with a tremendous alcohol and personal abuse problem with his wife comes to the surface. So I agree that these things may be universal. Now, you're at LighthouseNetwork.org.
Correct.
We've been talking to Dr. Carl Benzio. He's going to continue with us after this break. I am your host, Harry Jackson, and you've been listening to The Harry Jackson Show. We're going to talk more about how we can deal with emotional, spiritual, mental health right after this break. You want to stay tuned.
We've got to find some place to get out of this storm.
It's almost like the plot of a movie.
Yeah, except this is real, and it's a lot scarier.
I know, I'm getting seasick just trying to keep an eye on the markets.
Trying to make it in today's economy can seem like you're in the middle of a hurricane. Your investments are riding some big waves, and you're getting soaked by the financial storms. Come in and find shelter with a charitable gift annuity from AFA Foundation. You won't have to watch the markets anymore because a CGA gives you a fixed income for life. You can also earn higher income based on age, realize a deduction or tax savings, bypass capital gains on your gift, and enjoy a tax-free portion of the income. Let Diane O'Neill or Riley Wildman Davis show you how to weather the storm. Call today at 800-326-4543, extension 206. Email foundation@afa.net or visit afafoundation.net.
This is the Garlow Perspective.
Have you ever noticed in certain discussions you tend to want to back down because you just don't want to be perceived a certain way by people? You're afraid to stand for the truth? Do you ever have that problem? I certainly have at times. There's something within us that really wants to be approved by other people. We'd rather be popular than unpopular. Who wouldn't? But being approved by persons is not to be valued over conforming to God's wills, God's way, and His Word. Succinctly stated, we are not to be people pleasers. We choose to be bold, yet loving, firm, yet compassionate. Let's covenant together that we will not be intimidated by those who attack us for our stand on biblical truth, whether it's the government or be the media or the next door neighbor or even maybe a family member, because our dream and goal is to conform to who God desires us to be.
Jim Garlow at garlowperspective.com.
With today's Faith to Action commentary, here's Janet Porter.
How will the court rule on marriage? That's a question that many are asking as the Supreme Court considers two cases on marriage this spring. They will be deciding whether to uphold the Defense of Marriage Act in place since 1996 that forbids federal recognition for same-sex marriages. The other case involves California's voter-approved marriage amendment that has been making its way through the courts for the last 4.5 years. There are a number of directions that the court could go with these cases, and only one of them is good, which would be for the justices to uphold both laws. The long-term consequences of just about any other decision could be very bad for churches, religious freedom, and the institution of marriage itself. Pray daily for these cases.
Visit f2a.org for more commentaries and action steps, along with news, links, and much more for your state. Go to f2a.org.
Welcome back to the Harry Jackson Show. I'm your host, Harry Jackson, and in just a moment, you're going to hear from Dr. Carl Benzio, and Pastor David Parlett here in Beltsville, Laurel, Maryland, the beautiful side of the Washington, D.C. area. But first, I want to remind you, and we want to hear from you. We'll give you a little shout out on the air by Twitter at Bishop Harry, hashtag The Harry Jackson Show, at Bishop Harry, hashtag The Harry Jackson Show. Also, Facebook.com/HILC2. That's Facebook.com/HILC2. And come to the web, thetruthinblackandwhite.com. Thetruthinblackandwhite.com. At this website, you'll find 1-minute commentaries, as you've heard on the break here. You'll also find that I have op-eds where we take some of these topics and explore them in 800 words or so. And we deal with 1 or 2 new op-eds every week. And there's a bank of videos, the debates, their appearances on Fox, CNN, CBS Evening News, National Public Television, and many, many other things that you can access. And there are also some resources, Christian teaching resources that are available for you. So you don't want to miss those opportunities at thetruthinblackandwhite.com. And tomorrow, we want to say this before we let time get away from us. We're going to have Faith and Family Friday. Faith and Family Friday. Ken Johnson is going to be with us. He's going to talk about God's gift, a Christian vision of marriage and black families. So he's going to take a little bit of a look at the black family. And I want to say that marriage is on life support in America right now. And the black family is almost an oxymoron right now. The way things are going, it could be that if you're black, you would say that you're in a post-family era if we're not careful. And we're going to have to, as people of goodwill, faith, and common sense, begin to take hold, strengthen our own personal lives, our families, and the families of our children and our communities around us. So we want to have a few questions for Dr. Benzio. David Parlett is in our office, our studio. David, what question do you have for the doctor?
Yes, sir, doctor. Hi, this is David. How can you begin to really address addiction as a whole, particularly in these cities where you're saying drugs and alcohol access are kind of a rite of passage?
Yeah, I think that, it really starts with the family. We need to impress upon our society and on the people that live in this city, how important a family unit is. A mother and a father married together, living in a family, loving each other in a healthy way, managing conflict well, dealing with their pressures and their negative emotions in a healthy biblical way, drawing closer to God, and then being able to role model that for their children, so the children can see, what healthy living is all about, how beneficial it is to be in control of your own faculties and live with relationship, with connection and community, and really reap the joy that's there that God has for us in normal living. I think because of the destruction in so many homes in the inner city, that kids are looking for an escape. They're looking for community, and so they connect to the wrong people and the wrong peers and the wrong influence that are struggling and that have maladaptive behaviors themselves, and they band together. And we all, in our me-centered view of things, want the quick fix, want to feel better quickly. And so whether it's politics and voting for people that give us, what we want is immature babies crying, for my needs now, and I want fed now kind of thing, to little kids who are struggling and looking for, I just want acceptance. I want value. I want respect. And so they reach out in those kind of ways, and this addiction process perpetuates. I think in school, if we're going to make revolutionary, radical changes, the school should, instead of teaching so much academic stuff, we need to teach emotional, psychological management skills. How to respect each other, how to have courtesy, how to say thank you, how to manage anger, how to manage conflict. I think if we can start to teach that, that's a much more significant skill than whether we can, obviously we need some academic skills, but I think we're spending so much time on academics and no time on citizenry and just life management skills that everybody needs. Certainly the church, and bringing faith,
as you said,
into this process so that we can, bring the biblical principles. I mean, I learned growing up that the Bible is the best instruction book for living every day, the Bible. And so really being able to not just be a hearer of the word, but a true doer of the word, as both as parents and then teaching that to our kids, so our kids really understand those principles and can live out those principles, would go a great way to be able to help our kids grow up in a different way than, than what is going on now.
As you mentioned the church and the community. So how can the church play a role in recovery for the people who are going through these crises and mental health disorders?
Yeah, I think that, on our free resources, people will see at lighthousenetwork.org our Not Alone Radio Minute that really goes into a lot of addiction issues in both facts, information, warning signs, and what the church can do, what parents and grandparents can do if they have an addicted child. And American Family Radio Network plays that spot. And that really is equipping, but it needs to start from the pulpit. from the pulpit, there needs to be an understanding that we're all addicts. We all have idols of the heart. That's why the first commandment is, thou shalt have no other God before me, because we all have other gods before me. So I think everybody in the congregation, whether they have an overt addiction or one of these subliminal spiritual addictions that we all struggle with, there needs to be that recognition. That sets a culture in the church that really, instead of, well, you're a heroin addict, I can't sit by you, or you give me the heebie-jeebies,
Right.
or I don't want you next to my kid. There's an understanding that, hey, we're all in this together. We need to help each other. We need to support each other. I've gone to churches and heard many pastors, and unfortunately I hear jokes from the pulpit about if somebody has to go get counseling, or if somebody who's on a psychiatric medication, implying they're weak, they're non-Christian, they're not looking for biblical ways. And I certainly know that we have the ultimate counselor, and we have the Holy Spirit in us to guide us. But sometimes God gives us access to some material things here, whether it's some psychiatric medications that can be beneficial, or counseling from somebody coming from a Christian perspective, but helping us with psychological skills.
Could you tell us some of the warning signs that are on your website, Doctor? You'd mentioned them real quick.
That really makes
some of the warning signs that we can be alerted to as parents and church leaders?
They run away from the church. We want people with struggles to come to the church to hear the answers that the church has. And then being able to, from the pulpit, really teach application. I think if Bishop Harry has any influence in the churches and the pastors to really get across the point that a lot of them do a great job of expounding the word and bringing it to colorful light for us and showing us a certain principle in a passage that we might not have been able to see before, but usually they fall short of application. And how does this person in the pew take this great principle and apply it psychologically in their life on a day-to-day basis? So many people hear great sermons, they feel all revved up after they leave the great pep talk, and they go out of church and they don't really do anything different. And they come back the next Sunday pretty much the same person. Then there can be certainly support ministries in developing an addiction support group in the church that really reaches out, helps those with addiction, and starts to disciple and mentor them in a very regimented, kind of structured way, whether one night a week, couple nights a week, and to have some activities on the weekend, on Friday and Saturday, that are fun activities. Usually people with addictions are doing and getting caught up in the wrong places on Friday and Saturday evenings. So to have some activities for both the youth, the teenagers, and the young adults, for people to come to that, has fun-filled activities for the family to be involved in, to show, hey, there's a safe, fun, God-honoring way, to enjoy your free time on the weekends. And those are just some examples of some things that the church can do.
Yeah, that sounds great. We're having a little bit of a hard time. I think you're hearing David. He was trying to ask you also some of the signs of addiction.
Oh, okay.
We really find that some of our folks can't accept that their kids are dealing with drugs or dealing with alcoholism. And we were in a meeting last night, even ironically, talking about some of these issues. Can you unpack for us how we can tell that kid has a drug problem, or even a spouse has a drug problem in our home?
Yeah. Again, that Not Alone Radio Minute, we go over a lot of those signs and symptoms, and people can go to the lighthousenetwork.org free resources section, and we go through almost every single drug and what are the signs and symptoms and what are the treatment options for those drugs. So you can get a lot of resources and information on our free resources section on the website. But some basic things are, we're looking for changes. That's probably the most significant sort of constellation is changes, whether that's for a teen, changes in the way they dress, changes in their peer group, changes in their grades, in their study habits, changes in the interest. Somebody who might have been interested in basketball, played basketball for 5 years, but now all of a sudden, it doesn't really interest me. I don't really hang out and play basketball after school or sign up for the team. Changes in their dress, changes in their hairstyle. Now, adolescence is a time when change is happening all the time, so parents have to know their kids and have to be observant of them, engaging in conversation with them to be able to sense, well, what's the reason for the change? Some changes are positive and good changes, and we want to encourage, but the first thing we're looking for is change. Second thing we're looking for is their story adding up. Are there excuses? Are there things that are missing in their story, in the things that they're doing? Hey, well, I studied all night, but I got this kind of grade for, my test. Or I had to work late, but when you called them, you couldn't really get a hold of them when you called them at work. So are there starting to be gaps in their story or in their life that there's lack of accountability, or things just aren't adding up and making sense? Certainly if there's erratic thinking, erratic judgment, decisions that are being more compromised in what they do, whether they be financial decisions, job decisions, academic, peers. What is their judgment like? How is their decision making? And then how are they dealing with their emotions? One thing we don't teach very well in our society is how to deal with negative emotions. And we have some videos on our free resource section at lighthousenetwork.org that talk about emotions and the role that emotions play in our decision making. If we look at the Bible, God and Jesus had a lot of negative emotions. God was angry and jealous half the Old Testament. Jesus felt forsaken, abandoned, alone, worried. Negative emotions are a blessing to us from God to be our warning system, to let us know when something's not going well, and then how to be able to then look at that problem and manage it. But unfortunately, we're not taught very well how to deal with our negative emotions, and that's where addictions come into play as our me-centered way, our quick fix to sort of soothe those emotions. Look at how your child or how your spouse handles negative emotions. If they're having trouble handling negative emotions well, then they're probably a setup for some kind of addictive process, whether it's an overt addiction, like a substance, or whether it's something a little subtler, like gambling or pornography or spending, or it can even be food. I mean, food is one of our most deadly addictions that we have. You mentioned weight and weight issues. I mean, heart disease is our number one killer, and food and addiction to food is a significant element of that. So being able to manage negative feelings, and are we teaching our kids good, healthy skills to manage negative feelings? Right. Those are some of the big picture warning signs that we often see.
These are great. What about interventions? Have you had much success? We've got about 3 minutes in this segment, how would you deal with creating an intervention? I've got a troubled family last night, and knows a person I need to address about some issues, and there was a family that we really had to work on their marriage around some issues we observed. Here are their guidelines for interventions where we want to get them to you, but they're acting like they don't have any problems. I actually only have 1:30 left.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people think that unless a person wants to go to treatment, treatment isn't going to work for them. Well, we've had a lot of situations where the person hasn't wanted to go to treatment, and they've gone to treatment or have been forced or leveraged into treatment by their spouse saying, hey, I'm going to divorce you if you don't go. I'm going to report you to children and youth for being an incompetent mother. So on the free resource section, on the bottom, there's an intervention step-by-step, which actually goes through the intervention process. But interventions can be very powerful, but they have to be structured and clearly led, because they can be very destructive if they're not handled well. So the person has to be clear-minded, usually a good, objective facilitator of the intervention, and getting those key family members around to go through a formal intervention process can be very, very powerful and very life-changing. And any help with that, please call our lighthousenetwork.org helpline, and we can help connect you to interventionists and walk through that intervention process.
Wonderful. In the last few minutes of this segment, can you give us a little bit more about what Lighthouse, last 30 seconds, does as an organization?
Yeah, Lighthouse Network, we have a helpline that takes calls from all over the country and helps people that are struggling with behavioral health, addiction issues find Christian care. We provide support, encouragement, hope. A lot of us have been through our own addiction issues, and God has graced us, with a power to overcome, and we want to share that with others. But then we have a great expertise of what's out there. The behavioral health system is so complicated and difficult to navigate that we help people navigate and understand what's a good treatment situation that's going to fit their needs. The other thing we do is we develop resources. We have a daily devotional called Stepping Stones. We have a bunch of different free resources. We have some DVDs. And
Dr. Carl Benzio will be right back.